So I make my living administering psychedelics to people suffering from anxiety, depression, PTSD. And the purpose of this talk is to share with you that, in my experience, drugs are not the answer. Now, I'm going to share 3 insights with you that are born from spending the last several years of my life on what I consider to be the front lines of the psychedelic medicine movement. I am blessed in that I have found my mission in life, and I work with an amazing group of people, including my good friend and partner, Adam Tibble, who's not only an excellent human being, but also a wonderful physician. And over the past 6 years, we've literally administered thousands of treatments to veterans, civilians, patients as young as 18, and as old as 80. Now, I didn't used to do this work. I sort of stumbled my way into it. And I used to, as Rooney mentioned, I was a mindfulness-based leadership facilitator. So I'd travel the world, and I'd work with Fortune 500 companies or nonprofits. And it took me to places as far-flung as Pakistan and even South Sudan. And on the one hand, I loved my work, but it was also incredibly stressful. The travel schedule was really hectic. And I remember waking up one morning in a hotel room in Seattle, and I sort of caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and I just looked tired. I looked exhausted. And I remember leaning on the counter and just getting closer and looking deeper and deeper, and just having this sense of, you can't keep doing this like this. Now, I'm no stranger to anxiety and depression. I've experienced it pretty much my whole life, in and out. And like most of my patients that I work with now, I had also a fair amount of experience being on a cocktail of all kinds of pharmaceuticals. So SSRIs, SNRIs, MAO inhibitors, benzodiazepines, you name it, I'd kind of cycled through them and nothing was really working. And the part that bugged me the most was the labels. I had amassed a bunch of labels: generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? I was looking at this person in the mirror that was just this embodiment of these disorders and these labels. And I knew deep down that I was starting to slip right back into one of these dark, murky, sticky places that probably wasn't going to end well. And in that moment, I had the sense of, you're gonna have to do something different here. And so that leads me to this first insight that I'd like to share with you, which is that if we're not careful, these labels that we give to people, especially in a mental health context, they can have real consequences. So many patients that I work with now, they are convinced that they are those labels. And there's a sense of victimhood in there that generates some degree of hopelessness. Now, the inverse is true, and that is, if we can help our patients reframe their relationship to anxiety and depression, if we can help them shift from viewing these as diseases or disorders or pathological states, and rather view them as understandable and explainable symptoms of some underlying untreated PTSD, then we really give them a gift. And it's the gift of agency. It gives them a sense of motivation and purposefulness to say, okay, I can embark on this healing journey and I have the power to do something about it. So I came back to San Francisco and felt pretty motivated. I was like, okay, you're not gonna slide down this usual path to depression, so you're gonna do something different. So of course, the obvious conclusion was psychedelics, right? Not for everyone, and I'm of course joking, but it seemed like something really drastic, needed to happen in order for me to shift this. So I found a ketamine clinic. I wanted to do this legally. I was no stranger to psychedelics by any means, but I'd never really explored them in a therapeutic context. And so I found a clinic in San Francisco, and this clinic was, in hindsight, sort of this interesting mix of a high-end dentist's office and a surgery center. It was like they were kind of trying to make things comfortable and groovy, and at the same time there were lots of beeping machines and lots of white coats, and it was clearly very clinical. nonetheless, there I was in a chair. I had an IV in my hand, and I could feel the ketamine and the saline sort of snaking its way up my left vein. And about 90 seconds later, boom, I was gone. There was this swirling experience of lights and movement and this like eternal expanse. And now I'm starting to do the thing that all patients that I now work with try to do, which is they try to explain and describe their psychedelic experience, which is really boring for everyone else, so I'm not gonna do that, right? I'm not gonna try to explain to you this infinite expanse that, where existence all started making sense to me again. Having said that, though, I did experience something that I could best describe as an out-of-body experience. I was on the outside looking into life and myself, and I saw that little kid. I could feel him in there. And there was this overwhelming sense of compassion and love and even joy and awe at this whole enterprise of being a human being and being alive. And I knew in that moment he was going to be okay. I knew that I, the observer who was watching this whole thing, that I was going to be okay. And it felt like for the first time, we were ready to actually begin healing together. So I was pretty enthusiastic about these ketamine experiences, and I felt like almost someone had given me the keys to this shiny new car, right? And said, go for it. Go, start healing yourself. Go for the ride. The problem was I had no clear destination in mind. I had no map. I had no GPS. I didn't even know what the roads were supposed to look like where I was going. I had an amazing therapist, but I saw her for 50 minutes a week. What about the other, I did the math, 10,030 other minutes of the rest of the week? What was I supposed to do with that, right? And so I realized that in order for me to figure out how to take this beautiful vision of what I had just experienced and convert it into something that was actually useful and livable for me, I needed to take a step back and figure out what my destination was going to be. Now at CIT clinics, when a new patient gets onboarded, we, of course, do a really thorough clinical intake for safety and really to understand what's going on for the patient clinically. But we also ask two specific questions. The first one is, if you had a magic wand and could wave it and change 3 things about your life overnight, what would they be? And the second one is, how would making those changes change your experience of your life? Now, when I ask patients that question, most of them immediately say, well, of course, I'd get rid of my anxiety and my depression. That's obvious. To which I say, I know what you don't want. What do you want? Then there's usually a really long pause, and they get a little bit fidgety, and then at some point they look up and say, I have no idea. I don't know. No one's asked me that question in a long time. I haven't thought about it. And then some of them at some point will say something, I guess, I just want to feel normal and peaceful. To which I say, great, now we're going somewhere. But we're still missing the details. What does a normal Thursday morning look like to you? What does a peaceful Monday evening look like? Who are you with? What have you done all day? How many hours did you sleep the night before? Are you living alone? Do you have pets? How clean is your house? What's your credit card debt look like? Are you working? If so, where, with whom, doing what? Do you like the people you work with, right? The list goes on. And the point is, if we don't know where we're trying to go, there's no amount of ketamine or other medicines that are going to get you there magically, right? We have to engage in this conversation with patients. So my second insight that I want to share with you is that the destination matters. We can get glimpses of this beautiful opportunity, this sense of wholeness and joyfulness and so forth, but if we can't convert that into an actual roadmap or a plan, then it's going to be an uphill battle. We're missing out. And so the destination and the details really matter. So, okay, we've established a sense of you've got to be willing to start this journey. You need a sense of agency. You also need a clear vision of what the destination actually looks like. So the question that is still out there is great, so how how do I do it, right? Where do I go from here? So I have a question for you. Do any of you know what the Adverse Childhood Experiences Questionnaire is? It's an amazing tool. It's a very simple questionnaire. Consists of 10 questions. They're yes/no answers. And the score is generated by adding up the yes answers. And it's a tool that's been used internationally. It was developed back in the late 90s by some Kaiser researchers and physicians to try to understand this concept of developmental trauma or childhood trauma. It turns out that a score of 4 or more indicates significant childhood trauma and is correlated to a whole host of other health issues. So for example, a score of 4 or more indicates a 500% increased risk of depression, a 1,200% increased risk of attempting suicide. It doubles your risk of stroke and heart disease, and it triples your risk of obesity. This is just naming a few of this laundry list of health impacts. And the reason I bring that up is because patients at our clinic, half of them have a score of 4 or higher. 30% score 5 or higher. So you see where I'm going with this. Now the reason that matters is because when we are young and our nervous system is developing, we are like sponges. We are soaking up our environment. This is how we make sense of the world. This is how we learn how to deal with stress or how to interact with other people. So imagine if the environment that you're growing up in is either violent or unsafe, chaotic, unpredictable. What does that do to your ability to make sense of the world and function in the world? It has a massive impact. So part of our job as mental health providers is not just to pump you through full of ketamine and hope for the best, but it's actually to help you understand how to cope with these forms of arrested development. And so that leads me to insight number 3. There are what I would call the 10 non-negotiables of well-being. So these are foundational skills that we all need in order to be functional adults, healthy, thriving, functional adults. And if we're missing one or more of them, it's going to have repercussions. So the answer there is not to attach labels of disorderedness and pathology, but rather to say, great, let's figure out what the skills are that you need. Now, I don't have time to go into all 10 of them now. That's subject for another TED Talk, but I think I have a question that will help illustrate the point of these non-negotiables. So I want you to think of something, a habit or a behavior that you feel is not serving you that well. And now ask yourself the question, can I imagine myself thriving over the long run if I continue with this behavior into the future? I'll give you a really obvious one. Let's say I smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. So Ollie, can you imagine yourself thriving and being well over the long run if you continue smoking a pack of cigarettes every day? Right? I think we can all obviously look at that and say, no, that's not going to work. But what about something like taking out my frustration and anger on my kids? Or not expressing gratitude and appreciation to my spouse? Right? They're a little more subtle. And this is where we find that the actual rubber meets the road for the skills. They are non-negotiable because we know the answer that if I continue doing this behavior, I know what the outcome is going to be. Now the good news is the inverse is true as well. What if I said that the behavior or habit is practicing really good self-care or self-compassion? Can I imagine myself thriving and being well over the long run if I practice self-compassion and self-care? Obviously, yes, right? So the answer in terms of the 10 non-negotiables is to make sure that we are helping our patients with actual day-to-day behavioral change in addition to any pharmaceutical or other even psychedelic interventions that we're offering them. So I'd like to try to summarize these 3 insights that I've just shared with you using another example. Let's say I wake up one day and I come to you all and I say, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. It's in a few months from now, and I'm going to run it. So you might sit there and think to yourself, okay, insight number 1, agency and motivation. Okay, Ollie seems pretty motivated. Check, he seems to have that. Insight number 2, does he have a clear destination in mind? Can we define where he's trying to go? Check, we can do that too. But now we get back to this third question of, well, okay, Ollie, how are you going to get there? And to that I say, well, I've started supplementing my electrolytes. I'm doing a protein shake every morning. I'm even taking ibuprofen prophylactically for all the inflammation. And I'm watching YouTube videos, and I joined an online chat group of runners, and we're talking every day. Now, the obvious follow-up question would be like, okay, Ollie, that's great. Is that all you're doing? And I'm like, yeah. I'm going to start there, see how that goes, and I'm guessing at this point, hopefully, your confidence in my ability to run the Boston Marathon just plummeted by about 1,000%, right? Because the true question that needs to be on the table is, Ollie, what's your training schedule? How are you going to build day to day, week by week, your training volume, right? In other words, are you doing the important stuff that's actually going to make a difference? And if I sit there and say, nope, I'm trying all these other things out, I suggest to you that based on my experience doing this work in the mental health arena, that this is a really good metaphor for what happens often in mental health. Yes, we're doing some things. We are helping our patients a little bit here and there. Now we're even starting to, the abundance of ketamine clinics where you just go in and you get dosed up with ketamine, but you receive no additional support. It's just not going to work, right? It just doesn't result in success. So a reminder that ketamine's wonderful. It changed my life. I see it on a daily basis how impactful it is, but it really just hints at the possibility. It shines the spotlight on where things could go and how life could be, but the hard work still needs to happen day in and day out. So I hope this is a useful insight into this new world of psychedelics, and hopefully a really good pitch for the importance of comprehensive care in this space. Thank you very much.